And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, man, this is a video I've been wanting to make for a long time. I've had a lot of computer issues lately, a lot of audio issues, some lagging issues. Hopefully, everything should be fixed by now. So we should be good. Uh, but yeah, this is a video I've been wanting to make for a while. And I think there's a lot of reasons why I want to make this video. One, I think there's just like two very distinct sections of the hobby. Uh, you have like the people that are just the total, the world is crashing, prices are dropping, sell out of Pokemon, and then you have somebody on the other side saying, we're back to the best prices you can possibly get to, buy the dip, buy everything. And I don't know what's going on right now. And the reason why I say that is because while you have those two very distinct groups, there is a lot of different things happening in the Pokemon market right now that I'm seeing happen across the board. And honestly, at this point, the more I try to study it, the more I try to go in depth and see what's really happening, you would think that the more I look into it, the more points I could say, yes, the market's crashing, or yes, the market is dipping, or this area is undervalued. But it's actually the opposite. The more I dive into it, the more I try to understand what's going on. Honestly, I'm coming out more and more confused. And that might sound absolutely ridiculous. It's how can you be studying the market and become more confused? Well, the reason why is because, yes, we're seeing areas of the market that everybody is seeing drop. We're seeing sealed modern product really pull back, especially products that are heavily in print. And now this is the part that I'm really confused about. And I'm going to tell you why I'm so confused is because when we're seeing Chill and Rain and Battle Styles and Evolving Skies and Fusion Strike, these super modern sets retrace in price, I'm still seeing conversations be had with a lot of people, whether it's Discord groups or whatever. People are still asking, should I be buying this stuff? And a lot of these questions are being asked at products that are still have prices that I don't think they've retraced enough. And so this means one of two things. One, people are still clinging on to any bit of modern that they could grab onto, any sort of life and hope, even though some of the higher end stuff hasn't retraced enough. So if you have all this exuberance from people who are still questioning the market, it just makes me ask more and more questions. But then when I look at like more vintage stuff and the stuff that I am heavily trying to still purchase and the things that I was hoping, yes, finally the market's retraced and I can go back and pick up some of this product. The prices I'm seeing in some of this vintage stuff, especially when it comes to the way of sealed vintage product, the price retraces while some of them are there in some products, some of them are not there. And some of the buying pressure I'm still seeing is very strong. And I'll give you guys an example. Just before I started this video, you can probably do a simple Google search on eBay and just type in Skyridge PSA and just look at what the most recent sales were in the last hour. There was a lot of cards that have seen little to no retrace in price. Some of these cards are actually gone up a little bit. So it's making me ask a lot of questions. I'm trying to figure out, where is the buying pressure? Where is the money? And that's the thing too, is I look at the money. I say, where are people spending money? And there's still a lot of money being spent in Pokemon. Now, I don't know if this is still going to be just a temporary thing where all the money that's being flooded into Pokemon is eventually going to retrace, or I don't really know who's spending this money. I don't know if the people spending the money are truthfully just me and you trading cards back and forth, because while I understand that, yes, I'm still picking up stuff and I'm still doing my best to find good values and good deals and the things that interest me. And maybe that's the big difference too, is the things that I'm looking to buy, the things that interest me, the things that I think are undervalued are maybe becoming the things that other people are looking at too. Because to be honest, I don't go after sealed modern product. Yeah, I bought a couple Chill and Rain, booster boxes and Battle Styles booster boxes because I like the price points. But when I look at buying that stuff, like that's not where I wouldn't even call it a minority of my money goes. Like, not even a very small subset of what I'm buying goes to modern. So I look at, well, where am I buying? Well, I'm buying vintage stuff, and I'm always buying vintage stuff, and I'm constantly trying to just acquire stuff that I think is undervalued. And I think maybe that's like the subjective term we use too. It's, well, what I think is undervalued, maybe somebody else doesn't think is undervalued. Because if somebody becomes very bearish on the market and they just look at Pokemon as a whole, and they only want to start, like nitpicking areas of the market that they see prices retracing. They say, well, we're seeing things that I feel like are the obvious. And I just watched a YouTube video where somebody was talking about, things retracing. But the things they brought up were the things that it was like the big obvious no crap, you know? They talked about super modern product, but then they talk about like the stained glass birds from the hidden fates ETBs, seeing prices of those retraces. It was like, yeah, uh, are we not on the same wavelength, any of us? Like, is that the product that you did not see a retrace happening? The hidden or the trio of birds stained glass promo from Hidden Fates, like in PSA 10, with all the flood of cards coming back from PSA. It's like, is that the stuff you really are going to talk about? Because that is, I feel like, just the obvious stuff, right? And the stuff that it wasn't a question for most of us of if that was going to happen. It was really just a question of when that was going to happen. And I think we always knew the answer to the when, because the when was when PSA returns start coming back. All these will start coming back and prices will retrace. But then I say, well, why don't we look at more of the vintage stuff and things that don't have just ridiculous graded populations of cards. Like, let's look at some of this more niche stuff. But now this is a point where I need to really look at what I'm doing, because I always try, while I talk about what I see other people doing, the faults, I need to look at my own faults too. And where my own faults are is, while I think people that are very bearish for modern only look for like all the negatives, and I sometimes find myself looking at all the positives, I need to be more well-rounded. And I think that's the point of this video, is when I say, is the Pokemon market crashing? The answer is only kind of. And the reason why is I don't know if the stuff that I'm buying will actually retrace more in the future. And if there is just maybe a little bit of a lag time from the stuff that I am buying to the point where they're going to start to really retrace. And the reason why I say that is because I'm still seeing very strong buying pressure, and I'm still seeing very strong dollar amounts in a lot of these products. And I just keep asking myself the question, if everybody is really leaving Pokemon, which a lot of people are saying, where does this money keep coming from? And I tell you right now, the auctions that I'm buying, the items that I'm bidding on, they're not shilled items. They're auctions that have, 25, 30 bids on it, 17 different bidders, everybody with good feedback scores. Like, the items that I'm actively going after, and that's the thing too, is the things that I'm going after is I'm constantly looking for good deals. And I think maybe that's the difference too when we look at the bearishness of the market, is that I'm looking for things that I can get at market value. And now wherever market value is on a given day could be up or down, but as long as it's like a baseline of that market value. But what I see a lot of people doing, and I'm sure you feel the same way as me, think about how many auctions on eBay you have to search through, or how many eBay auctions you see end, even auctions where people will list their starting auction bid price at literally the highest end price that that product has sold for in the last year, or it will be even higher. They list auction prices almost the same as you or I would list a buy it now auction for a 30-day timeline that we don't even really kind of want to sell. We kind of just throw it out there with a buy it now price, and we're like, hey, if somebody comes along and really wants this card enough, maybe they'll buy it. But I see people constantly doing that at like auction starting prices. Now, that is not really new in the hobby, but what I'm seeing happen is I'm trying to think about who can those people be? And maybe those people are the people that are really just super disconnected from the prices that stuff are actually selling at, the prices that a lot of the stuff it's actually worth, versus that huge disconnect where people are starting to look at this stuff of, well, what do I think this is worth? Or, you know, they don't pay attention to any recent sales. They don't pay attention to other items of the exact same grade from whether it's PSA or CGC or whoever graded that card, even though you can have a card on the market, or in a lot of cases, multiple of those cards listed at lower prices. So I wonder if some of the conversations that people are having are those people, those people whose buy it now auction is literally $20 higher from the next closest item, and their products are not selling. And then they look at the market as a whole and say, nothing I have on my eBay account at Buy It Now, literally nothing is selling. And maybe they're afraid to list it for auction. So they keep doing this thing where even though their Buy It Now price was, let's just say $100, and they start their eBay auction at $100 and they can't figure out why nobody's buying this stuff. They can't figure out like why. And they must look at the market and just say, this market is terrible. I can't sell anything. Nobody's buying anything. But why is that the case when I think a lot of people are doing that? But a lot of the stuff I'm buying is there's a ton of buying action and a ton of competition. And I don't know if it's me too, because maybe I can be blinded with the sense that if I'm constantly still in auctions and I'm still battling against people trying to get low prices and I can't, but you got to keep in mind, I also told you many times, I try to buy things for a good deal. That's why I like to follow auctions. I like to bid in the last, 2 to 1 second of auctions. I am never a guy that will bid on an auction with 7 days remaining. That's just not what I do at all, with the exception of obviously like PWCC just to get an extended bidding. But when it comes to eBay, I'm never the first person to bid. I'm always trying to be the last. Now, maybe the thing is too, is the reason why I'm still losing out on a lot of these auctions is because I still am just a cheap buyer in a sense, or at least I'm going to continue to try to find whatever I think the best deal is out there. And maybe the auctions that I'm looking at and the items I'm looking at, it is possible that they are truly just the best deals out there, and that there are just other people out there very similar to like me who are going after these things and they view them the same way I do as, oh my God, this thing might sell for a price that is extremely undervalued. Now, and that's the thing too is, and I've talked about it so many times on this channel, and some people want to talk about it almost like it's a negative. It's like, in a way, be patient. And, you know, when you tell somebody like, you as the buyer, you should be cheap. You should look for the best deal. You should not want to just spend your money willy-nilly. And the reason why I say that is because if you want to be successful in this hobby, even if it's from a short term or a long term, it doesn't matter. The most important thing in this hobby is the price point you enter at. And I've also been one to say it's almost impossible to perfectly time anything. I don't care who you are. You're probably not going to be able to, sell things at the very highest, and you're probably not going to be able to buy things at the very bottom. But over time, if you stick with it, if you're constantly waiting for things to come up, you don't just get antsy. You don't say, oh, I learned about this card yesterday. Let me go on eBay and now find any card that I could find at whatever the current buy it now price is, and let me just buy it to hold on to it. If people are patient and they look for good deals, that's how they're going to continue to be very successful in the long term of the hobby. And if you are starting to do this, you're going to have no option but to start following a lot of different cards through a lot of different subsets. I don't know about you, but I constantly have to go back and delete stuff off my watch list. And most of the time, it's all my watch list stuff that already ended because I can never add stuff to my eBay watch list because it's literally always at whatever the max capacity is. And then I just go to the bottom of my ended items and I have to delete, like 15 at a time. And then still that day, keep deleting 15 of those ended items because I'm constantly watching items. And, I could have my watch list could easily be maxed out in a day and just following items that are ending that day because I already have like the search terms in mind that I'm looking for because I'm constantly waiting for that good deal. Now, I think that's what a lot of people are doing now is they're starting to learn that. They're starting to just become more patient and they're starting to say, there could be some really good deals, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And if you're going to be successful, I would say right now is a good time. And I think people look at the market and they say, the Pokemon market is crashing, all these prices are retracing. And I'm going to say that I hope that actually becomes a little bit more of the case than we're seeing. And the reason why I say that is because it's possible if we have a lot of people who sent away just every single card in their collection, it didn't matter what it was, they just sent them all away the PSA or they sent them all away the CGC. And they were like, well, these cards are going to be gone for months at a time. And let me not even think about that final value fee or my credit card getting charged for all these grading fees. Now, if all these cards start coming back at once and this true like flood of slabs come, there could be people just trying to liquidate a few of these cards just to pay off their like credit cards and fees. People might have been doing things that while it seems very obvious to me and you, the very obviousness meaning, listen, if you send cards away the PSA or you send cards away the CGC, eventually the bell tolls. Eventually that knock comes on your door and your cards get delivered. Like while it might seem like a long time away, a year away, especially PSA, some people have, you know, uh, submissions just coming back from like January. Listen, eventually everything comes to a head. But now, this is the important thing is if you have now positioned yourself, and I hope you have, because I talked about it 2020, 2021, while yes, I was still buying in both 2020, 2021, I was definitely a net seller versus a net buyer. Now, this is the thing that I've talked about in other videos, and this is always like kind of like the sad part of Pokemon, right? And the sad part of selling is that I wish I could sit behind the camera and just talk to you guys and say, listen, every single card I sold in 2020, 2021, I wish that I just had dollar for dollar that money in my, bank account or my PayPal or, my PWCC account. Like that's not the truth either. Is while I was a net seller, I took out a lot of that money and paid off like, you know, tons of debt, no credit card, almost nothing left on my house, paid off car payments. Like I did all that. So when that money got allotted to things that are not just waiting for the down dip in Pokemon, which is always a sad thing, right? It's like, and I've talked about this before, is there are some cards that I let go or sealed products or booster boxes that when I, mailed those out for the last time, it was a question of I'll never own this again. I will never own this graded card again. I'll never own this booster box again because the prices that a lot of this stuff has now reached, even with a retrace, I'll never own them again, especially when you could have, for like some of this Team Rocket stuff, when you could have, price points of $600 for a booster box. Like, and at the price you sold at versus the price you bought at, like, I'm sorry. No matter how hard the market retraces right now, like, I don't see Team Rocket first edition booster boxes retracing back to $600. So that'll be something that I will never be able to get back again. And did I feel comfortable with a lot of the prices that a lot of this stuff sold at? Yeah, but it is that sad part too. And that's why when I say, I hope you guys are all positioned in a point where now when the market is still in this downturn, now you can still like acquire a lot of stuff and make some really smart choices. And while I still see like the value in this, I'm just hoping that you guys weren't just constantly buying, that you were able to position yourself in a way that is beneficial for you. Now, like, so I know that was a long-winded thing, but I wanted you guys to know that while people talk about the Pokemon hobby, while they talk about like everything that the market's doing good versus everything that the market's doing bad, the whole purpose of this video and what I've been really wanting to get off my chest now, and I haven't been able to with like the Christmas holiday, everything is I think the answer is lying now somewhere in between. And it just really, and the reason why I say the answer lies somewhere in between is because, like I said, you can find the most dire of situations where Chill and Rain booster boxes are dropping down to $75. Or you can find the most positive things where some PSA 10s of some of this more vintage stuff is still fetching premiums. Or you can look at like a first edition sealed booster box case selling for $3.5 million, my ass, but let's just say the public price of $3.5 million. You can look at like the super positive or you can look at the super negatives. But like I said, I really think that the question is it lies somewhere in the middle. And now as the market begins to develop and continues to grow, now we're going to start to run into a weird issue where things are going to get stagnant for a lot of people. And I don't know how this is going to play out. And the reason why I say I don't understand how it's going to play out is because if you have somebody who maybe bought some Pokemon in 2020 or 2021, but they didn't over leverage themselves, meaning they didn't max out their credit card and they didn't, sell their dog and do all this stuff just to acquire Pokemon. Let's just say they acquired like a booster box of every set at $150 for a booster box, which things we told people not to do, but let's just say they did it. And now prices have retraced to $100 for Evolving Skies or $80 for Chill and Rain. I just want to know, like, if these people weren't over leveraged, are they going to sell this stuff? And now this is a thing that I just don't hear enough people talking about because I think we always want to just say everyone that overpaid for stuff, they're going to just sell and the market's going to crash. But what happens if these people don't sell? What if they're not over leveraged? What if they're just going to sit on their loss for however long it may take for them to recoup their money? And sadly, some of this product that they bought, some of these graded cards, maybe the time to recoup their losses could be never, meaning they never get back to some of these prices. But that brings up this question of, well, what if these people don't sell? You know, what if somebody who lost, I don't know, they bought a booster box at 120 and now it's selling at 100. They're down $20. Well, what if they don't sell that booster box? What if there's no incentive for them because they don't have to like just recoup whatever money and hopefully like, and I think that's a larger majority of the market. I think there is the outliers, the people that just bought a ton of everything and they're sitting on cases of booster boxes. And yeah, those people, but I think for the majority of people, the majority of the new collectors that entered, I don't think they're sitting on as much of this sealed product, as much being relative to pre-2020, what they're sitting on. Yes, it is a lot of product when you look at people's sealed modern collections prior to 2020. But in the big like realm of it, I don't think that people are sitting on like as many cases of booster boxes. So if this just now has all this product getting tied up and locked away for months or years at a time to the point where people, even if they leave Pokemon, it's still not worth it to them to sell. I just don't know what the long-term effects of something like that is in the hobby or what the long-term effects are in a lot of the sealed modern product. I don't know. I think what's going to happen is what we're already seeing is that retrace for modern. But if this stuff is really truly tied up in a way that I think a lot of it is, it could just mean that sealed modern product is actually a better play at these super low prices than we're even really considering. And I know that might sound crazy because right now we're living in today. And when you live in today, at this moment, at the time of recording this video, and there is an absolute ton of this modern product for some of these sets on the market, when you look at it that way, yeah, it might look like this very dire situation where chill and rain prices will never recover, or battle styles prices will never recover. But it's because we live in now, we live in the today. But the question is, that's a good question. Well, what happens when this stuff goes out of print? Does this stuff go out of print and prices never increase ever? Meaning, do we only ever see chill and rain at $80 from now until eternity? Or does the market just fall out so hard that the lows we're seeing at the 75 or whatever, what if there isn't a bottom? What if that bottom keeps dropping and dropping and dropping to almost like an eternity? And yeah, we can look at some of this really old stuff. You can go back and you can look at like Jungle or Fossil Unlimited packs selling for $2 a pack. You Yeah, you could go back. So could we see that happening for some of this modern stuff? But it's interesting too. And the reason why I say that is because when you think about a 36 pack booster box, even at $2 a pack, that really only brings you to $72. So it's this really confusing time right now. And I wish I'm like struggling. I hope you can see it. Like I'm struggling, like trying to talk through what's going on. Is it just this issue of we are at the bottom of 72, $2 of booster backs, but it's going to keep retracing? But I don't see that being a thing that's going to happen. But what's going to happen now when I said you have all these people that picked up a booster box or two and they have it now wrapped up in their sealed collection? When prices just make it back to whatever their price point they bought at, well, what are they going to do at that point? Are they going to have sat on a booster box for 2 years and now just be at the break even point and they're going to have no reason to sell that? Because that could still be a thing. It's like, okay, like it's been 2 years. I have this Chill and Rain booster box. It's now worth $120, $140 because it went out of print in the end of 2022. Chill and Rain went out of print. Now I have this booster box. Did I just sit on this thing for 2 years because I was dumb enough to buy it at 120? They're probably still not going to sell that stuff. Now, the question is, but are we going to see a ton of buying pressure before it even gets here? Because if you have a ton of people acquiring this stuff at these real low dollar amounts of $80 a booster box, every time it reaches like different milestones, $90, 100, 110, are we going to constantly see this stuff flooded on the market? Or are we just looking at this through a very narrow lens? Because when you think about it, when you think about really distributor pricing for the majority of people, and I don't have distributor agreements, so I can't talk about this across the board, but I know for a fact, this is one thing I can say for a fact, that there are a lot of people out there getting product direct from distributors, and that product costs them more than $80 for a booster box. So think about that. Think if the people who have the distributors, so maybe, and this is again a maybe, and I don't really know this for sure, but I've been trying to do my best to brainstorm it. What if that the product that we are buying, at $80, $75, because yes, we do live in the world that there are a few people out there that have way better distributor agreements than other people on the market. What if by us being able to buy from them, what happens when their allocations, when their product eventually dries up? What happens when that guy on eBay who has sold 1,000 Chill and Rain booster boxes at $80 or $75? What happens when his booster boxes for sale eventually dry up And again, yes, I know. We live in now, we live in today. So it might seem like an impossibility. It might look as if people like this will be sitting on thousands of booster boxes forever. But I'm tell you what, that's not probably going to be the case either. And the reason why that's not going to be the case is people that are sitting on that much product, thousands of booster boxes, they don't make their money sitting on product. They make their money turning and burning and flipping stuff. They want stuff coming in the front door and going right out the back. They don't want to sit on this stuff. So the question is, when their stuff finally is gone, the allocations finally go away, and it happens. And you know why? Because you can go to those same big sellers that are selling Battle Styles or Chillin' Rain, and good luck finding them selling a Cosmic Eclipse or a Team Up booster box. They're not there. The reason why they're not there is because they have burned through all their product. So I just don't know. And this is like my thought process when it comes to all this stuff. It's so many questions. And I think the things that make people nervous, and it should make you nervous, is, well, what if these are not the final waves? What if we see like wave one of a product, wave two, wave three, and then everybody says, okay, we're finally done? Well, what if just more waves come? You know, I told you on this channel, we have like this amazing liberty because it's a small channel, we get to speculate. And I think that is so valuable for like this channel and just the hobby as a whole, that we get to speculate. But I want you to think about this. Do we really think that Pokemon is going to really just want to print products and print sets that are not in demand? Because that would be so against the norm for the most part with what Pokemon has ever done. And the reason why I say that is because Pokemon, when you think about it, they are a train on a track and they're chugging along and they do not stop for anybody. They don't stop for me. They don't stop for you. And even times when we look back on sets and we said, man, I really wish they would reprint this. They don't. Yeah, people will point out things like evolutions, and I think by pointing out the obvious is fantastic because you got to look at, in the last 5 years, you could find a product that's like, wow, this stuff got really reprinted. Or you could look at like a Hidden Fates, and yeah, Hidden Fates got reprinted. I think Hidden Fates could still technically be up for another reprint. Like, people are like so anti that. They think it's almost like blasphemy to say Hidden Fates maybe should get another reprint just because there's such strong demand out there for that. And people will say, well, Hidden Fates, if they made a reprint of it, it would sell out instantly. There wouldn't be a single thing on the shelf. But if they reprinted Battle Styles, it wouldn't sell out. And people will literally tell you that I think that Pokemon Company is more likely to reprint Battle Styles ETBs than to reprint a Hidden Fates ETB. And I just think we are so far disconnected from, speculating like Pokemon making the decisions they're making, and if it makes sense. What products make sense for Pokemon to pump out? And yeah, their new products are going to continue coming out. We get to look forward to a pretty good set coming out very soon. You know, now with that alternative art Charizard, I don't know what an alternative art Charizard's going to mean for this hobby. I think it's one of those things a lot of people have speculated on for a while. Now, we look at modern products and we look at single prices and we say, man, we look at where single prices wind up after like third wave, and they're always very low. But I want you to think about something that's very different than I could ever remember. When I look at some of these modern single prices, you know, when I look at the Rayquaza or, the secret or the alternative art like Umbreon, or I look at the Sleeping Tyranitar, or I look at even like the Fusion Strike Gengar, or pretty much like any chase card for super modern product. Yeah, you always had the playability price of cards. you know? You, but when you think about it, it's like, man, some of these modern chase cards, they've retraced, but some of them are still selling for, pretty high dollar amount when you think about it for a modern product. And maybe that's the thing too, is because I just don't buy enough modern product to open and enjoy and collect. Like, it would be a cold day in hell when you'll ever catch me buying, you know, whatever the modern chase card is, just to have it. Like, maybe I'll buy a couple in the long term, like when prices retrace. Like, I'll give you an example, like the Gold Star Umbreon from Celebrations. I haven't bought any, but I do eventually in the future, hoping prices retrace more than we're already seeing. And as more Celebration gets open, like, that is a card that I'm hoping to pick up and start acquiring over the course of the next, you know, call it 18 months. But I haven't bought any yet because I'm waiting on it. But now when I look at some of these real high end alternative art cards, I'm like, man, like, that card is, yes, very nice looking, but I can't believe how many people are still buying it at this extremely high dollar amount. Because when you think about some sets in the past, and you think about the chase cards, and you think about where prices wound up on some of these cards, it's very few and far between where prices of cards truly hold high. And yeah, when it comes to like a modern product, you can go to like Burning Shadows or something like that. And you can look at the Charizard and Burning Shadows and say, that is a ultra modern Charizard, which we have seen the majority of that be open. Is Burning Shadows going to continue to be open from now until forever? Yes. Is Burning Shadows very high on my speculation list of sets that are going to be reprinted? No. So when you look at a product like that, that to me, Burning Shadows is a very modern set. And I'm sure for most of you, Burning Shadows is a modern set. Like, when you think about Burning Shadows, you think about it as a modern product. But when you start to pull back and look back on it a little bit, you're like, man, is Burning Shadows still like a modern product? Like, yeah, it is, but it's not. But then when you look at that Charizard, you say, what are the prices that that thing is doing given enough time and given huge population reports and tons of that card being graded? And yeah, that the pull rates for that card was hard. But when I look at these pop reports for some of these like ultra rare cards, and yeah, there's a lot of them, things, population reports that me personally, I don't feel comfortable with those pop reports. I think they're just too big. But again, I'm subjective, because when I look at pop reports for some of the sets I go after, for some of the cards I go after, I'm looking at graded populations of some of these cards in PSA 10, less than 50. And sometimes some of the sets I'm looking at, for that card to have a graded population in PSA 10 of 50, sometimes is a lot. So when I see some cards in the graded populations of thousands, I say, man, I don't like the fundamentals of this card. And maybe this is where my problem is, because when I look at a PSA 10 graded in the thousands, I'm like, man, this card doesn't make any sense. There's no way this card can hold value. But then I look at recent sales of some of this stuff, and I see what this stuff is selling at after all this time, and I'm like, yeah, man, there's no way that Pokemon is really doing as bad as we're really saying, because there's still people out there that could absorb a PSA 10 population of, say, 10,000 cards for some of this stuff and still have prices stay above $100. That means that there is at least, like, I mean, it's like $1 million worth of some of these cards are out there in the population. And when I say, well, is $1 million a lot for some of these cards? For me, I would say, yeah, it is. Because when I look at some of this stuff, I can look at, PSA 10 populations of 50, and that card has 100 graded, and that card, or 50 graded, and it sells for 500. It's like a $25 market cap. Looking at some modern stuff that has market caps of 1 million. And I'm like, no, it's just not possible. But then I can't ignore the fact that while I say a lot of this stuff is impossible, time and time again and day after day and sale after sale, like the market, it constantly proves me wrong. And it tells me that this stuff is possible. And then that's why I get excited about the future. And even if this stuff does retrace some more, and you got cards that have a total market population of $1 million for some cards, even if it had like a 25% retrace, it's still like 750,000 market cap. Cards I'm looking at, some of them, like I said, are $500 cards, have $25,000 market caps. And sometimes I own like two of those cards. So I own 1/25th of an entire market share of a card that I like now when I look at this vintage stuff. A card that, again, speculative, right? Subjective. I think have good like fundamentals. I think have low populations. Cards that I think will never have a total graded population in the tens of thousands, like over my dead body. Some of these cards, like literally cards that logistically in my mind, and I'm talking set cards for some of these older sets, Aquapolis, Sky Ridge, Expedition. Like if you watch this channel, it's not a secret, like stuff I buy, EX Dragon, Ruby Sapphire, like I like all the EX cards. Do it. Like Ruby Sapphire, EX Mewtwo. Is that a card that I ever see? A total PSA 10 graded population of 10,000? No, I don't. So even at that card at $100, which that card in PSA 10 obviously is more than $100, but that card will never have like a $1 million market cap bill. But then when I look at cards like that, vintage cards, I'm like, man, if you could have a modern card with $1 million market cap, like, can these vintage stuff that I'm looking at in the long term, and I think that's where people get confused. And it makes sense, right? It's because you gotta be confused. You have to be nervous about this. But when I look at cards that are, 40 PSA 10 selling for 500, and I think in the lifetime of that card, maybe it'll reach 300. Well, is it possible that some of these cards in the long term could be $5,000 cards? That's a 10x from where some of these cards are selling for at 500. Like, do I think that the market is strong enough that some of these cards can 10x in the next 5-10 years? And that's the crazy thing too. Maybe that's where my biggest fault is. Because when I look at these cards, and I think that's the thing, it's when you really break it down, and it's really a question of, do you believe in the hobby? Do you believe in these cards? Do you believe in the fundamentals? Do you believe in all the stuff that you preach or all the stuff that you say? And for me, I would say that the answer 100% of the time is yes. Like the stuff that I say, whether or not the stuff I say is true or whether or not the stuff I say ends up being false in the long term. The question is, do I believe in what I'm saying? And I think for me, the answer is always 100% of the time, yes. And I try to beat around the bush and I try to say stuff, but I think the fear is, and when I talk and I make videos like this and I talk about like, yeah, the market's crashing, but I still see things as being like good options, good buying opportunities. When I look at this, my biggest fear is that you might take this video and say, well, I agree with you and I'm just going to buy everything. And that's not something I can say too. Is people always ask me, they're like, well, what do you think about, like a certain set? It's like, I don't know about certain sets. Well, what about a certain card? It's like some cards, it's like, I don't know. I only know like the cards that I've researched and the cards that I believe in. Now, and that's the thing too, is people say, well, is all Pokemon will drop in the future or all Pokemon will go up in the future. That's also not the case. That's where you have to like do your homework and like really understand it. It's because probably more likely than not, there's a lot of cards in 5 to 10 years that I do believe will 10x, but there's also a lot of cards that I think could honestly be stagnant for the next 5 to 10 years. And as crazy as it says, when I could say some cards will 10x, I think there are some cards that we're still going to get returns back from PSA. And again, a lot of this is graded cards. There's cards I think in the next 10 years will be at prices selling lower than today. And that's the hard thing when you make videos like this. It's like, how do you like use your words, and how can you portray it to somebody where you can say, I can see some cards 10x in 10 years or 5 years, or some cards I could see 10x in like a lower amount of time, which is crazy. And like, that's the super bullishness of me. But then still say like some cards I see being less in 10 years. And I think that's where like the hardest part of this channel is, in the part where like I have to be the most careful, because that's just the truth. And it's, again, it's like what I believe. And I don't know where the market's going to wind up in a day. And I don't know where the market's going to wind up in a month or even a year or 2 years. But when I think about it, when I think about the sets, the products, the things that I had that did the best for me in the long term, the things that I was most successful on, it were things that I just had as part of my collection. And yeah, I always did the quick turn and burn flip. Like, yeah, like buy a collection, sell off a couple cards, try to recoup your gains, send away, 50 cards for grading, get them back, sell 10 or 20 of them, try to, break even on grading fees, and everything I have left, those cards are graded for free, even though, you sold like 10 or 20. Like, however I want to like justify things in my mind, because that was the thing in the past, is when I would do these buys or do these sells, I was always just justifying stuff to one person, justifying stuff to me. Now, I hope you guys can do something similar. But then I look at it, it's like, well, out of the cards I kept, I always would keep like the highest grade cards. So that would be PSA 9 or PSA 10. And when the market finally came along to some of these cards, like when it came to the high end, those were the cards that people really wanted. Those were the cards that would set the market sometimes. When you would have a 10 on a card that maybe didn't have like crazy low scarcity, but it had a crazy low pop to it. And again, this is the thing too, is we talk about like pops. It's like, well, when you look at pop reports, it's like, well, yeah, that card only has some of them only have PSA 10 pop reports because nobody was grading it. But then when I see how many people bidding on this stuff, how many people were trying to buy it, how many people were rising up that price, I'm like, man, yeah, not a lot of people were grading that card, but my God, there's a lot of people that want to buy that card, if that makes any sense. So when I look at that, I'm saying, man, yeah, that maybe not a super rare card, but there's a lot of people want to buy it. Now, in the future, will there be more people wanting to buy that same card? Because if I could have an auction I sold for some, you know, obscure PSA 10 that I didn't even think was going to get a lot of bidding action on it, and I had 20 different bidders jacking something up and selling for double what I expected, or sometimes 3 times what I expected, because the cards that do the best are always the cards that I expect to do. The cards I least expect to do the best are always the cards that do the best, if that makes sense. The cards that I think have, you know, I I don't know where this card's going to wind up. I don't know what a true price point is for this card. And maybe that's what a lot of people do. But then when I look at it, I'm like, okay, well, if you had 20 people bidding on it, and even in the future that card does retrace, man, there's still 19 other people that want that card. So that card will probably do good in the long term. And that's a 5-year, 10-year timeline for some of this stuff, especially for graded cards. When you look at PSA, when you look at turnaround times, and again, we're speculating if PSA ever truly gets back to a $10 grading fee. And I don't know if that's going to happen. Maybe. We're far away right now. I know they're saying mid 2020, but right now that seems like forever. You think about PSA opened up, the lottery or whatever you want to call it, to do the $50 grading. A lot of people didn't get any of those $50 grading. Some people were able to get like 5. I think they ended up doing like a second round. But it was like, yeah, everybody was clawing, foaming from their mouths to get a $50 grading. People got 5 and they were super happy about it. And I asked around, not to a lot of people because I already knew the answer, but I asked around like if anybody had any extra $50 slots. You know how many answers I got where people said yes? I got 0. No one had extra slots because everybody had cards that they were very happy to send at $50. So, man, if every time PSA really does open up these tiers, and the 100's not even really open, the 50's definitely not really open. It was just that lotto system. But man, there's a lot of like people that just want to send away cards. And I think at that point, they're not sending away the crappy cards either. They're sending away the good cards because they must still believe in the hobby in some way. Now, brings up that other question of, well, what about all these other graded card companies, all these fly by their pants, one day they didn't exist, now they exist? What's going to happen with all these slabs? Because for the majority of these slabs, I would say that a lot of them are, you know, cards that maybe aren't worth to be graded. But there's a couple cards, they come up occasionally, not all the time, but you got cards that are truly good cards. Cards that somebody could have sent to PSA and got a PSA 10. But for whatever reason, they chose to not send that card to PSA and get a PSA 10. They made the conscious decision to send that card away to some other grading card company. Like, when you talk about some of these cards that exist on the market, some of these real, true, gem mint, high quality cards, it's like, man, what's going to happen with all this stuff? Because when these other tiers open for PSA, and I don't know when that's going to be, I'd be lying to you if I told you I really knew. But when this opens, like, man, what's going to happen with all these other slabs? Like, are people even going to want to touch them at all? Like, even for, I've acquired now like a handful of slabs that are cards that I actively want, that I plan to cross over the PSA in the future. But I'm buying some of these cards with the intention of cross grading with an unknown timeline. I don't even know when, like, how long I got to sit on these cards. Especially if some of these cards are worth it only to cross grade over at like $10. It's like, hell, I'm going to sit on these cards for potentially years. You can say that you can buy a card that you expect to grade at PSA for $10. And realistically, you could be looking at a timeline of like 3 years. Think about how crazy that is to grade a card for $10. I don't know, guys. It's yeah, there's a lot of stuff I just wanted to say. Get off my chest. I don't know. There's a lot going on. I don't think there's a lot of good answers. And I think that's the problem too, is we want to look at the market and we want to just like slice it down the middle and say it's a clean cut. Everything is very clear. I don't think it is. And what I'm most not nervous about, most like it's a combination of being nervous and a combination of being super excited. It's about that new collector that entered in 2020, 2021, who sticks around. And I was trying to think, like, in the past, I don't know when you would say somebody was no longer like new to the hobby. But I would think like maybe 2-year timeline. Maybe we're getting to the point where people aren't new anymore. I think there are some people that are still new or just don't, they either can't absorb information or they just don't care. But I think about those people as separate. But if you have people that have been in the hobby now for 2 years, like, I mean, that's not a new collector anymore. That's kind of like an older collector, And you think about like different, if you maybe you had somebody in 2014 enter, by 2016 they weren't a new collector. Or somebody that entered in 2018, by 2020 I wouldn't consider them a new collector. Or 2012 to 2014. It's like, man, like, what the heck is going to happen now when you have this new subset of collectors who are just much smarter? And people say that, like, well, how can these people potentially in the future be smarter? I'm like, well, people like that can be smarter now because there's channels like this. There's channels like Jake from Pokeknowledge. There's channels out there that are going to give people like a lot of the tools they will need to just bypass a lot of the learning curves. Or just go on E4 Discord. Yeah, you got to cut through the general chat and or go on E4 or whatever. You got to cut through, but you can do your research. You can read old threads. You know, you pick and choose what you want to believe. I would say that's the best advice I give you. Is not everything that's written on there is true. But now, if you have all these people that have just a ton of information out there, there's a ton of information on YouTube. Every question you want answered is probably answered by somebody at some point. I think a lot of this is, just the same thing said over and over sometimes. But when you're like, man, there's a lot of people out there just absorbing a lot of absorbing information faster than I was. Like, I'll tell you, in the first 2 years when I got back into collecting, like it wasn't a full-time gig at all. It was just I'm going to buy some cards here and there, complete, some of the holes in my collection as a kid. And then maybe I'll play a little bit of this game. But 2 years, I wasn't even close to where some of these people are, or at least didn't go through the school of hard knocks. And I think that's what a lot of the people who joined in 2020, 2021, they got a real hardcore lesson, a doctorate level class of the hard knocks, because they saw something that I never really saw. And yeah, we talk about the Pokemon Go boom and all that, but navigating 2020, 2021 was very different than navigating the Pokemon Go boom. I don't remember a lot of like the product scarcity. And I think that's a different thing too, that I don't know what's the future of the hobby when you talk about modern. Modern in the vestibility conversation. It's a new conversation. It is a new subcategory or whatever the heck you want to call it. I don't really know what you could call it, but it's new. It's something that I'm trying to navigate even now, trying to figure out how to navigate it in a more public forum. Like, yeah, that's what this channel is. Like, I talk about things in a public way, trying to navigate it like day by day. Pokemon for me was really never day by day. Like I knew what I wanted, I knew what sets I wanted, and it was just pick up cards here and there, navigated alone, navigated in private, never having to like constantly adapt the way we are now. I think that's the difference too, is that constant changing and adapting. That was never really a thing. Like some of these sets would just be like, yeah, I want more of these cards, and these cards just don't ever come up for auction. 2020 helped out a little bit for some of those cards because it kind of like shook some of those cards out of people's collections who maybe didn't have attachment to it. But there was points, even in the downturns, where there were some sets where I'm like, man, this person knows exactly what they have. They're not letting this card go for free. I'm still starting to see that again happen now, where there's some cards that people are just not letting go for the cheap. I'm like, man, I want this Pokemon Crash to be much more apparent to me. I want people to really not know what they have. And yeah, you get lucky sometimes. We always got lucky. Like, that's not new either. So it's just, there's such a change going on, and I'm doing my best to navigate it. And talking to you guys in the chat and doing stuff like this. But man, it's a confusing time, guys. But I haven't really got to read the chat. I just been standing on my soapbox, talking like a maniac. I know. But if you guys had any questions you want answered, I'll try to answer questions for a couple minutes. But yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, guys. I appreciate you guys all tuning in. Uh, I'm glad the video quality is good today. I'm glad the sound's good today, because if you guys were trying to tune in on the last couple videos, I appreciate you guys, sticking in there with me. I know we had a lot of computer problems and a lot of like audio issues, but I have all that fixed now. And I did talk about it on another video that Jake was the first one to reach out to me uh, to go on somebody else's channel. So if you guys didn't get a chance, I recommend you going to Jake from Pokeknowledgecommunications channel and checking out that live we did. I thought it was a great conversation to echo. He's a smart dude. He knows his stuff. He has a very different like view, and the lens he looks at stuff is because he was very active in Pokemon when I wasn't. Like I was part of that original 1990, but in 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, I was in high school. I graduated high school in 2006. So I was not collecting Pokemon then, but he was playing Pokemon, running leagues and stuff in that 2000 timeline, all like the gold star sets, stuff like that. Like he was actively participating in the hobby. And that was when I wasn't in the hobby. That stuff I had to go back and I guess kind of teach myself or learn it so I could go and read articles or do stuff like that, or find the sets, look at how much I see on the market, look at pop reports. But it's not the same as talking to somebody who was actually there for that. So just that insight he gives is very valuable. Now, he didn't rejoin the hobby until like the boom. So like 2020 hype, 2021 hype, and he got to, in a way, rediscover Pokemon. And he rediscovered Pokemon in a way that his collection was probably much larger and bigger than, call it, I don't know, 95% of the people out there. So he got to rediscover it in a different way. And it's very interesting. But I really enjoyed that conversation. And I do hope I do get opportunities like that again in the future to be able to go on other people's channels, and to more importantly have other people come on this channel too, to be able to have conversations, because I think it's one thing to just sit here and talk, and it's tough sometimes to just talk and not have like a anything you could read off of and just kind of like wing it in a way. It takes a lot of effort. So to have somebody else like having conversations, and I've now like played around with different things. Like I had a sports card guy on, like bounced off questions if he was a former tops or former upper deck executive, and had like Nick from Old School Pokemon or Mason, or I've been trying to do that, because I'll tell you what, when you talk about time flying while you're watching it, maybe it's like, oh wow, that's a 3 hour stream. That is a long stream. There's how the heck can they talk about Pokemon for 3 hours? When you're there talking for 3 hours, bouncing ideas off people, talking, it's like that time goes by super fast. I wish my workday went by that fast. I wish, as easy as it was for me to talk about Pokemon, like my workday went by. So anyways, hopefully that gave you guys some time to wrote some. Uh, Ancient Muse said, "Knowledge. I've been trying to find one of those Dream Eater Hypnos raw near mint now. I only have my childhood one, and it's wrecked. Yeah, it's a nice card. The Dream Eater Hypno he's talking about is the Hypno Hollow from Aquapolis. I recently bought a GMA 10 Hollow Hypno, and then on my last stream I cracked it open, and we're gonna resubmit it to PSA now that the tiers are a little bit cheaper. Uh, Derek said, I picked up the Dream Eater Hypno in reverse raw for $14. That's a good deal. I hope it was in near mint condition. Gary Oak said, there's no crash for rare stuff, only the common stuff that's getting bought up from the hype from rookies. Yeah, I think you're right. And I I think there's got to be a segue where those people that are just paying all this money eventually start moving into more of this scarcer, more of this vintage stuff. And now, is there a part of me that's like nervous about that, because I'm like, yeah, now it's going to be impossible to buy stuff, but there's still a part of me that's like, man, if we start to see strong buying pressure in this more rare vintage stuff, like there could be a ton of money to be made again in the long term or in the short term or the near term. Like, that's the thing, is I think everybody just saw the, like, what product for Modern did in the short term. It's like Modern product, rocket emojis to the moon. Everybody made a million bazillion dollars by going in and scalping product off Walmart. It's like, good for you. Like, I don't know how to do that. Like, that's not what I'm good at. Like, that's not, like, if you're watching this channel, I can't tell you how to scalp Walmart or scalp Target. Like, that's not where I know how to make money in this hobby. Like, yeah, you probably could do it, but the money I'm talking about, the investability that I'm talking about, is much different. Like, it takes a little bit more than just saying, this is the hot set because this is what everybody's talking about. Where I am most successful is the parts of the hobby where people are not talking about stuff. But I really honestly believe that someday people will talk about it. And that's the biggest, weirdest, like, conversation to have with somebody. They see the hype of Pokemon and they're like, wait, you're buying stuff that you think people are going to like? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, but to me, it makes all the sense. So, uh, let's see. Knowledge. I've been trying to find, or let's see. Australian Blastoise said, knowledge. Do old serial numbers on PSA cards influence what you're willing to pay for certain cards, regardless of them being in great condition front and back? No, it doesn't. The only thing that really affects those cards is literally the condition. Like, I think it's almost like the weird argument for other grading card companies. While other grading card companies will not fetch a premium for those cards, but it's like, if you had a card that if you sent to PSA got a 10, but you decided to send it to some other grading card company, it doesn't change the fact that the condition of that card is a 10. And it's the same way with these older certs. Like, if that older cert is truly a 10 in your book, like, I would say, yeah, go after that older cert. But I would say the same thing about new cert numbers. Like, people are like, yeah, PSA is a lot more strict and they're not giving out as many 10s. I don't think that's really 100% true. I think what the more true part of that conversation is, people are just not sending as many lower grade cards, or sorry, people are sending more lower grade cards to PSA. I don't think their grading skills have changed as drastically as people have said. I think there is a small part of that is true, but it doesn't change the fact that if you have a PSA 10, that if you sent to PSA today would get a PSA 10, but you just happen to send that same card 10 years ago, it doesn't change the true condition of the card. Never Cold said, question, at what point in time when it comes to Wizard of the Coast commons and uncommons, is it a first edition only? Is unlimited pretty meh? I don't know. Some of this stuff is really subjective. Like, question, at what point does it come to Wizard of the Coast? I don't really understand the question. I'm just wondering if you're saying, should you go after commons, uncommons? Like, maybe go after some raw sets if that's what you're looking at. Like, pick up a bunch of these, sort through them yourself, and find cards you think are worth grading in the future. There's a lot of commons, uncommons for all this stuff that who knows when that stuff will hit the market. Let's see. Giraffe Vector said, Poke Knowledge, what are your thoughts on black and white shinies? Bullish on them? Think they're great buys? Listen, right now for black and white, any card raw that you think is a good buy is probably a good buy. It's just that simple. I can't really think of any black and white cards with the exception of a couple. Like the Rayquaza, the Kyogre, I forget what sets those are from for black and white. But yeah, man, like, any black and white chase cards right now raw sell for nothing. I mean, you have chase cards from sets that sell for literally less than the cost of the pack. Think about that. That would be the equivalent is if a Charizard first edition raw costs less than that pack. Like, it's such a weird thing going on with black and white chase cards versus the price per pack. Where, yeah, well, for a first edition pack, you're like, well, that first edition pack is $20,000. The Charizard first edition card sells for way more than $20,000. But this black and white stuff, it's like, oh, well, this black and white pack is $50, and the most expensive card in the set is $40. It's like, I don't know. I think, yeah, to answer your question, black and white cards are definitely like good buys in my opinion, undervalued. Like, they're, especially if you want to like do what I already do on Gold Star sets. Like, Gold Star sets, I tell you all the time, I love the holos in those sets. I don't really want to buy the Gold Stars. I want to buy everything else. I want to buy the EX cards in that set. I want to buy the holo. It's the same thing with black and white. If you want to really start going that deep into black and white sets, start picking up holos, you could be talking like $1 or $2 or just some insignificant amount of money that is almost like borderline bulk for some of this stuff. Now the question is, how long are you going to have to sit on some of this black and white stuff for? Could be a long time, or it could be a short term. You know, especially when you talk about full art cards, could be a lot of full art cards when black and white being the original full art set. Could be a lot of like financial incentive in the future if people ever start looking at this stuff. People are going in a very weird order. Like, you already see that XY full art cards are already starting to pop. Now, maybe that's just the new ebb and flow of the market where people just say modern, then we're going to go the XY. And now that we're done with XY, we'll finally make our way to black and white. Who knows? The Reshiram Zekrom, the full arts from black and white. I feel like we've been talking about that now, but those are the first ever full art cards from black and white base set. Like, those cards literally sell for less than the sealed product. So now, I'm not saying in PSA 10 they sell for less, but if you could probably pick up a lot of these cards in near mint condition. Let's see. So Scott said, Flex Gods and Pokeknowledge live stream. Let's get it. We've already talked about doing a live stream together. So yeah, there's a lot. But yeah, guys, I appreciate every one of you guys tuning in. I don't want to keep this live going on too long. I just want to answer a couple questions. But I appreciate every one of you guys coming on. If you guys ever want to contact me, the best way to contact me is probably through Instagram. I do have a Pokeknowledge Instagram. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I have no clue. I don't follow anyone. I think I have some people following me. I have 0 posts. I kind of just keep it open for contact reasons, but you guys could feel free to reach out to me there. I don't know. You could follow the account that's not following anybody and has no posts if that's something you want to do. But other than that, guys, I'll catch you on the next video.